He had never once attached decorations to his garments, adding no adornments to his outer clothing. Just an ordinary man who carried his lunch container and wore scuffed boots as he arrived at the factory gate each morning like clockwork. Most of his fellow workers thought he was simply tired, slow-moving, and perhaps absent-minded until a young naval commando appeared with a fresh appearance, confident stride, and keen vision. The newcomer showed no deference by refusing to salute or ask permission, instead fixing his gaze on the older worker and speaking just one word. This revealed a hidden identity unknown to all others, something everyone should have recognized Dan when he uttered that statement. The entire break area seemed to freeze because some people simply don't bother with displaying their honors. They carry their complete experiences in solitude. And sometimes the room's silence becomes the most noticeable sound. Finally, someone expressed their thoughts on the situation. "Come on, join us, and stay a while," they said, wondering what happens when a code name gets forgotten and what we call reappearing. It's actually someone considering becoming a follower of this channel where ancient stories are cherished. Just one person quietly called to him. "It's Charlie, not Mr. Watkins, or Sir." Charlie, the older second-shift worker, always arrived 10 minutes before his shift and left punctually. He never made much conversation beyond his morning greeting and tired acknowledgement toward the time clock. His work boots staying the same day after day, weathered and creased like his hands, coat, and hat, all without patches or logos, just gray fabric and silence. On cold days, he would sit quietly in the break room near the heating unit, drinking black coffee from a metal thermos, always remaining silent and never joining in when the younger workers whispered about sports, plans, or weekend activities. Many assumed he was slow, and some joked that he might have forgotten where he kept his military decorations, probably earned during some legendary conflict, while they laughed and kicked at vending machines. However, the supervisor knew something different about Charlie. He seemed to anticipate mechanical problems. Unlike the machines, he didn't just understand them, grasped their patterns as if he could predict their behavior. When conveyor belts snapped or gears seized, they called Charlie steady hands because his work was flawless, consistent, and without showmanship. He never sought recognition, preferring to repair what was broken rather than tell stories. When things fell apart and returned to nothing, no one questioned his source of such precision, and nobody noticed the faint scar behind his ear or how he habitually positioned himself against walls, unconsciously scanning for escape routes. This continued until that Tuesday when everything changed, and the atmosphere grew tense. The parking area was shrouded in February mist, making surfaces slick while the usual rumble of engines filled the space as workers moved about. Charlie was already heading toward the building when he leaned in, sipped his coffee, and looked at the old wall clock that always showed 2 minutes past the hour, followed quickly by the door opening to admit an unwelcome visitor who refused to synchronize with the machinery's rhythm. This newcomer was approximately 30 years old when he arrived in town, with enough intensity to cut through the quiet. His polished identification badge read Desert Storm, and boots concealed his expression just above his heart. He moved with purpose, not the kind that requires concentration, but the type that already possessed it. The conversation stopped. As everyone searched for answers, and even the microwave's humming seemed to fade, the young man scanned the room once, then walked directly to Charlie with determination. He offered no salute or request for permission, stopping abruptly 3 feet away from the elderly man and speaking quietly, uttering just one word, "Revenant." Charlie's world shifted with that breath. He remained calm, didn't blink, simply looked up with eyes the color of worn stone, and met the young man's gaze after standing. Rather than moving quickly or dramatically, he rose steadily, though gravity seemed to pull at him differently. Nobody moved as tension filled the room. No one understood. But something long forgotten changed, because Revenant in that context wasn't just a call sign, it was a gateway. The scar represented a passage that could be summoned. And the relative positions of the two men shifted. Burdened with reputation, the naval commando finally spoke again, this time in a whisper that was nonetheless audible. "You were legendary. Sir Charlie said nothing, only nodded once, as if that encompassed everything. Time seemed frozen in the break room, stammering as if caught in a symphony of workshop noise and the silent weight of an incomprehensible designation. Charlie remained unmoved and unchanged, shocked not by recognition, but by something more profound, something understood only by men who had performed tasks locked in classified files. The young commando's composure didn't waver. He didn't approach closer, but remained still, like someone standing before a monument. Several co-workers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Someone tried to break the tension with nervous laughter. "Well, Charlie, looks like you've got admirers now." Charlie stayed silent, his clouded eyes showing no interest as time passed. But his memories stayed sharp, focused on the soldier's face. Then, as if summoned by something greater than standard procedure, he spoke for the first time in years beyond his usual work tenure. His voice was suddenly gravelly yet gentle, rough like footsteps on broken stone. The commando gave a slow nod in acknowledgement. Charlie didn't smile, though he managed to lift one corner of his mouth slightly, a small movement suggesting muscle. Memory from a time before walls were built around him. The young man's jaw tightened as he stepped back, and Charlie's jaw set with a slow nod folding into the silence. Nobody understood what they were witnessing. But the atmosphere had changed. This wasn't a reunion, but a transmission. An encrypted exchange of memory between two men separated by time, yet connected by spectral warfare. The foreman entered from the hallway halfway through stirring his coffee, confused. "Everything okay here?" The commando didn't look away from Charlie. "Sir, may I speak with you outside?" Just like that, Charlie nodded again, placed his thermos down silently, and followed the soldier out through the rear door to the parking lot, soaked from overnight rain, where a single black SUV waited with its engine idling quietly. The door closed behind them, but the silence remained inside. "No one touched their coffee," someone whispered. "Revenant, what does that mean?" Another shrugged. "Sounds like something from a movie." But in the lot, the commando opened the rear door not for Charlie to enter, but to retrieve something. A wooden box, old and polished, but weathered, secured with brass fasteners. He held it carefully, as if it weighed more than wood. Charlie stared at it without speaking. The commando placed it gently on the SUV's hood, unlatched it slowly, and turned it toward the older man. Inside, beneath layers of dark velvet, lay a single item, not metal or a badge, just a folded flag with a patch on top. The patch was frayed and faded, nearly black, but the stitching still told its story. A raven with spread wings, holding a broken timepiece. Charlie's breath caught not audibly, but his shoulders revealed the truth. The commando spoke again, softer this time. "We found this in a storage unit in Morocco. It's no identification, no records, just this and a note." Charlie looked up. A note. The commando nodded. It said, "For the one who never returned home, but never stopped listening." The wind stirred gently across the lot, pushing cold air into the spaces between words. Charlie stepped forward, lifted the patch with both hands, and stared. He wasn't holding fabric. He was holding every name never spoken at a funeral. Every classified mission, every brother lost in places maps don't acknowledge exist. The commando stood silent, like someone who had just returned something sacred. Charlie, the man without medals, finally let his hand fall gently on the young man's shoulder. "No thanks. No speech, just that. A transmission received. A mission completed." The SUV departed quietly, as if trying not to disturb whatever spirits had been awakened in that parking lot. Charlie stood there long after the taillights disappeared. Into the morning fog, still holding the patch in his weathered hands, as if it might vanish if he released it too soon. The wind tugged gently at his jacket edges, but he didn't move or blink. Inside the shop, someone peered through the blinds. It's uncertain whether to say anything, or whether it was even their place to ask. When Charlie finally turned and walked back, inside the break room hushed without being told. He said nothing, just picked up his thermos, secured the cap, and left it in his locker. Then, instead of returning to the production line, he clocked out for the first time in 15 years. Charlie left before noon. He He walked down the sidewalk like any man his age might, slow but steady, as if the street remembered his footsteps. He didn't take the bus or ask for transportation. He simply walked, holding the patch wrapped in a napkin from the break room. One hand tucked in his jacket, the other protecting the memory from the wind. 3 blocks later, he stopped before a brick building with no sign. Just a small brass eagle on the door framed the Veterans Hall. He hadn't entered in over a decade. It's not since the night he'd watched them present a folded flag to the widow of a man whose name never appeared in newspapers. That night, Charlie had vowed never to return. But now something had shifted. Something had been given back to him, and he needed to confront it. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and quietude. Old photographs lined the walls, black and white portraits of young men in uniforms, some smiling, some staring, as if they already knew what they would lose. Charlie walked past them without looking, past the front desk, past the elderly man dozing under the television, and straight into the records room. A younger clerk looked up, startled. "Can I help you, sir?" Charlie didn't stop walking. "I need a file," he said, his voice flat but steady. "The Revenant dossier, Ghost Team 79 through 82. The clerk blinked. That's not public record, sir." Charlie stopped and turned. "I'm not the public." The clerk hesitated, uncertain whether to protest or comply. But something in the old man's eyes, steady, still cold as if the wind hadn't touched him in years, made him reach for a key. "It'll take a moment," the clerk muttered. Charlie waited wordlessly, watching dust dance in a shaft of sunlight near the filing cabinets. The box arrived sealed in gray tape and labeled in long faded handwriting, "Revenant classified, return unopened." Charlie took it with both hands. He didn't sit, just opened the lid slowly as if expecting it to scream. Inside were pages, photographs, maps, stained with coffee, and coated in ink fragments of men and missions erased from every archive.
Act memory.
One photograph slipped out. A younger Charlie standing beside 2 other men. One wore sunglasses. The other was missing from the waist down, propped on a crate but still smiling. Charlie stared at it, then found something stranger behind the folder letter. Newer, written not in typewriter ink, but by hand. The same handwriting from the patch box. It read, "If you're reading this, the name has been spoken. We never abandoned you, Charlie. We just had to become shadows. But now the lights are changing, and it's time." No signature, no sender, just the same old symbol, the raven and the broken clock. Charlie folded the letter with both hands. He didn't cry or speak, but inside, something long buried began to rise, not grief or regret, but purpose, the kind that doesn't knock. It returns like thunder. He didn't go home. Charlie walked straight past the street where his small apartment stood behind the laundromat, past the diner where the cook never charged him for coffee, past the empty bus stop, bench that had held his silence every Thursday for years. The patch was now folded inside his jacket pocket, but it pressed against his chest like a heartbeat that had returned. He didn't need directions. His feet already knew. The address was muscle memory on Old Warehouse, 3 miles out of town, long boarded up and overgrown with vines, with a rusted sign that once read Rexton Storage. Now, hanging sideways from one bent nail, he hadn't stood before this place since the day they told him the unit no longer existed. The day they took his keys, his name, and told him to forget. But the thing they never understood about men like Charlie, he didn't forget. He obeyed, he buried, but forgetting that wasn't in his nature. He stepped through a side entrance half hidden behind a broken fence, and the musty darkness of the warehouse enveloped him. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old oil. In the far back corner, behind stacks of forgotten crates and a collapsed metal shelf, was what he came for, a floor panel painted over, sealed with rubber, invisible to anyone who didn't already know it existed. Charlie knelt, slower than he once did, but still with hands that remembered precision. He lifted the edge, peeled back layers, and there it was. A locker, standard military issue. Scratched, but still intact. His fingers hesitated just once. Then he drew out the old key, thin, rusted, tucked behind the patch. The locks. Click was soft, like a breath exhaled after too many years. Inside the locker was a duffel bag black, heavy, folded with the kind of discipline that never unlearns. Underneath it, a sealed envelope marked with a single word, activate. He didn't open it yet. He sat on the concrete floor, bag across his knees, envelope resting on top, and let the memories in, all of them. The mission in Laos, the fire team extraction in Mali, the rendezvous in Dar es Salaam that never made it past midnight. All of it. He could still hear the codes in his ear, the helicopter blades chopping against silence, the breathless pauses. When they waited to see if they'd been discovered, they had always said ghosts don't retire. They vanish. But Charlie was tired of vanishing. He opened the envelope. Inside was a burner phone, no number, just a single message waiting on the screen. Protocol Bravo 4, in effect. Confirm status. His thumb hovered over the reply button. No instructions, no questions, just the kind of message meant for someone who didn't need to be told what it meant. He typed, Unit acknowledged, solo survivor confirmed, standing by. Seconds passed, then another message arrived, Navy SEAL. Extraction inbound. Do not engage, observe, and confirm target movement. Package en route. Charlie closed the phone. He knew what it meant. Somewhere someone had triggered the old world to start spinning again. The patch had spoken, the name had been heard, and now the mission, the one they all thought had died with the silence, was coming back to life. He rose, slower this time but with a steadiness that hadn't been seen in him for years. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car passed without noticing the old man stepping from shadows. From that moment forward, Charlie was no longer just a factory worker, no longer a shadow. He was a ghost. Walking back into the light, and the world, whether it wanted to or not, was about to remember. They met at dawn by choice, but because certain rendezvous were never meant to happen under the sun. The warehouse was gone, torched in what authorities later called an electrical fire, though no one could explain how a building with no power supply erupted in such calculated fury. Charlie had been 2 blocks away when the first plume of smoke rose. He didn't flinch or run, he simply turned and walked, slow and invisible. Back to the riverbank where the world still spun as if nothing had changed, though everything had. He knew the protocols once Bravo 4 was live. Everything went silent. Memories became liabilities, names became codes, and old men like him became necessary again. That's why when the black SUV stopped at the edge of the river park, he didn't hesitate. The man who stepped out was younger, early 30s, sharp build, short cropped hair, calm face. No insignia, no introduction, but Charlie saw it immediately. In how he moved, how he scanned without appearing to scan. SEAL, not just enlisted either. This one had been deep, probably held rank too. The young man approached slowly, nodding once like he was greeting someone at a gravesite. He didn't salute, just spoke. Echo 1, you remember Havana? Charlie's mouth twitched, not a smile, just enough to show the old reflexes hadn't rusted. Havana was wet, he said, and loud. The young man's eyes softened for half a second, then were good. They sat side by side on the old wooden bench facing the river. Charlie didn't speak first. The younger man reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin envelope thick with folded pages. It's all in here, he said, placing it between them. There's a name we need confirmed. Someone's trying to sell the Ghost Protocol, and they've already used your code name twice in the last 3 days. Charlie didn't touch the envelope. Why me? The SEAL paused. Because when your name came up, half our boardroom didn't know it. The other half stood up. Charlie let that sink in. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like fog before a storm. Finally, he reached out and took the envelope, flipped it. No markings, no blood, just clean white paper and whatever truth was buried inside. You've got 2 hours, the SEAL said. After that, they scrub everything. We won't be able to touch it again. Who's watching me? Charlie asked. The man looked forward, eyes narrowing at the sunrise. Everyone and no one. We're not the only ones trying to wake up the old files, but only one of us came with your patch. Charlie nodded once, then almost like a whisper from another life, he asked, What's your name, son? The seal hesitated, then offered, "I go by Bishop now." "That's not your name," Charlie replied. "No," the seal agreed, "but it's the only one they'll let me keep." They rose without fanfare. Charlie slid the envelope into his jacket's inner pocket, already knowing the weight wouldn't let him sleep tonight. Bishop turned to leave, but before he did, he said quietly, "Sir, when I was 10, my dad told me about a man who got 27 hostages out of a jungle no one could even find on map. He said the man never got a medal, never got a name, just walked away." Charlie didn't turn. "Your dad talked too much." "Maybe," Bishop said, already halfway to the SUV, "but he never lied." And then he was gone. The bench felt colder now, but Charlie remained. For the first time in years, the wind wasn't just brushing his skin, it was speaking. And what it said was clear: "You've been remembered. Now you're being called." The hall was packed not with generals or press or high-ranking officials, but with ordinary people. Factory workers, grocery clerks, night shift janitors. They'd come for the community briefing on workplace preparedness. A routine event usually dull, but this one buzzed with tension.
Ow.
Ever since the warehouse fire, rumors had swirled about strange visitors. Old government vans, black-suited men watching from the parking lot. None of it made sense until today. A podium had been set at the front of the hall beneath an American flag and a row of faded banners from forgotten civic groups. The mayor stood beside it, nervously flipping through note cards, unaware that he'd be completely irrelevant by the end of the hour. Charlie sat near the back, same boots. Same coat, no medals, nothing but the quiet weight of something bigger than everyone else in the room. Bishop had told him the name would be spoken today, not in secret, not behind a burner phone, but here in public. Under fluorescent lights and stale coffee breath, at exactly 10 a.m., a man stepped on stage. A Bishop, taller, broader, wearing civilian clothes that couldn't hide a military posture honed by decades. He scanned the crowd once, didn't smile, leaned into the microphone and began. "Some of you might have heard the stories, maybe even laughed at them. That there's a man in this town who once pulled 27 civilians out of an enemy stronghold with no air support, that he went ghost right after. That he never took a ribbon, never gave an interview, never showed his face again." Murmurs rose, heads turned. The man continued, "Well, I'm here to tell you it's not a story. And he's here." Silence. The kind that slices through a room. And then he said it to words, a code name, not a rank, not a full name, just 2 syllables. That hadn't been spoken aloud in over 30 years. When they hit the air, it was like the ceiling had dropped 6 inches. People stopped breathing. Charlie didn't move, but his eyes lifted slowly, as if some switch had turned the world back on. The man on stage looked directly at him now. "Sir, on behalf of every SEAL who ever trained in shadows, of every mission that was never declassified, of every operative who survived because you existed, we thank you." Bishop appeared beside the stage, no longer hidden. He was in uniform this time, full dress. Stepped forward, walked down the aisle without hesitation. And as the room parted for him, he stopped in front of Charlie and bowed his head. Not a nod, not a tokena full bow, hands behind his back, eyes closed. The kind of respect you can't teach in any academy. The hall remained frozen. Even the mayor stood silent, note cards forgotten. Charlie rose slowly, boots creaking. He looked at Bishop, then the man on stage, then the room. No speeches, no grand salute, just 3 words: "I still remember." And with that, he turned and walked out into the morning, into history. Because some legends aren't written on medals, they're carried in the silence of those who know and finally choose to speak. Thank you for watching. It's not all heroes wear medals. Some just wear time on their faces, silence in their footsteps, and stories that only resurface when someone finally remembers. If this story moved you, even just a little, consider sharing it with someone who still believes in quiet courage. Subscribe to this channel, where forgotten names find their voice. Again, and where truth is honored one whisper at a time.